Shots from the Hip presents Sports History. Here are Jason and Oz.
Let's take a look at this. All right, I'm just firing this up. Now, of course, today, by my calendar, is April 15th. And so we can start from here. This is pretty typical in American sports media right now. Of course, on April 15th, 1947. Okay, hold on just a minute. Let's see. Okay, so April 15th, 1947 was the debut of Jackie Robinson in Major League Baseball for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, Jackie had been playing for the Montreal Royals, in fact, for the previous season, a few months in the 1947 season, but debuted in April for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And thus the legend was born. And as we like to say in America, he shattered the racial barrier that had been in Major League Baseball. So there are many ways to approach this beyond just telling the Jackie Robinson story, which a lot of people know about. There are a couple of movies about Jackie. The old one from the 50s, I want to say, is the Jackie Robinson story. Really, really, really terrible. Really terrible movie. Jackie Robinson plays himself, and sorry, he may be a Hall of Famer. He may be one of the all-time greats, but not an all-time great actor. Another movie called 42 was released, I want to say, about 10, 15 years ago, starring Harrison Ford as Branch Rickey. I'm not sure if Michael B. Jordan was playing Jackie in that piece. I think it might have been Michael Jordan. That one too, I don't know, big problems. It was more like the Branch Rickey story than the Jackie Robinson story. But if you're really curious, that'll give you some of the background, albeit very simplified. But I'd like to approach this from another angle. In fact, two other angles. First off, okay, you can see my screen, right? So well, you can't. Okay, let me share screen. Hang on just a minute. I am going to, for those watching the thing, I am going to show you my awesome skills, my awesome PowerPoint skills once again. So here we go. Let's go to this. Okay.
There we go. All right.
Whoops. I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. There we go. See my awesome PowerPoint skills. Look at this. I am just killing it here. Oh, let's go to my English lessons. Okay, hold on. Take this out, please, in the final edit.
Time out.
Hold on. I am, let's call this back up. Okay, can you now see this? Click to add title. Okay, can you see this? All right. For those watching, hopefully
yes,
you have it up. Where is slideshow? There we go. Okay, so here we go. Nice empty slide. Question. I have a question for you. Okay, now I know you're not a huge baseball guy, but I'm sure you know that the magic number in baseball is 400. If you hit a batting average of 400, will make you a legend. Question. Why has no Major League Baseball player hit 400 or better over a season since 1948? Okay. And let's consider a couple of things. Here's the thing. You know, this has become this sort of legendary achievement. But the truth is that between 1920 and 1948, 35 times on the major league level did somebody hit 400. Now, it's actually a little bit more than this, but we're only talking about players who qualify for the batting title. So you have to have enough plate appearances to actually be considered for this. Now, okay, fair enough. Between 1920 and 41, this was only done 9 times in the traditional National League and American League. Now, the other 26 times were done in the Negro National Leagues. But still, on one hand, it's not like it's happening to everybody. On the other hand, pretty much every year, one or two guys is hitting 400. This disappears after World War II. The closest in my lifetime, of course, George Brett in 1980 hitting 390, and Tony Gwynn, who maybe we did not appreciate this guy when he was playing, but among the many incredible statistics on Tony Gwynn is this. Do you realize he hit more home runs than strikeouts?
Wow, really?
Yeah. And the dude played for, I think it was 16 years. And he was not a home run hitter. You know, he's a leadoff hitter. And yet, literally, he's striking out maybe 10 times a year. Right? This is unheard of. And still, the best he could ever do in terms of average was 394. Now, of course, this was in the damn 1994 season. The season that was ended because of the strike before we got to that awesome Yankees Expos World Series that we were denied. So many great achievements that year just disappeared because of this strike. But anyway, I don't want to get onto that. Okay. So why is this? Well, like I said before, I wanted to start with Jackie entering the league on April 15th, 1947. One of the things that we should always talk about, and this is happening less and less, is, of course, on the face of it, it looks like, oh, yeah, sure, Branch Rickey just had enough, right? And he just decided one day that, there are all these great black baseball players, so we're going to start putting them in the major leagues. Well, it was actually quite a long process. The story goes back to the 1800s with Moses Fleetwood Walker. Great player. First got to the highest level of professional baseball with the Toledo Blue Stockings, which I've always said that if there were another expansion team in baseball, they really should be the Blue Sox. Right? I mean, that would be so great. Like, let's have an old-fashioned team name. And we've got the Red Sox and the White Sox, so come on. We need a Blue Sox in there. But these were the days when a lot more teams were called the Soxes. And so this is in the 1880s. Fleetwood Walker played on Toledo with his brother, who also had a really sweet name. Unfortunately, I have lost this, but he also had a great name, like Moses Fleetwood. His brother, unfortunately, was mostly beset by injuries, and so didn't play that much. Now, this is in the 1880s. So the Toledo Blue Sox won, get this now, they won the Northwest League, right? Imagine Ohio playing in the Northwest, okay? But this is America in the 19th century. All right? We haven't expanded so far west yet. So Toledo wins the Northwest title, and so they actually joined the American Association, which at that time was the biggest major league. Okay. Unfortunately, he ran afoul of Cap Anson and his Chicago White Stockings, I believe they were called at that time. And Cap Anson was known for two things. One, for being basically the greatest player of the 19th century, certainly the greatest hitter. There's an argument for Cy Young, of course, but certainly the greatest hitter of the 19th century was Cap Anson. Okay, no question about it. The other thing that Cap is known for is being a complete racist. I mean, this guy was racist beyond belief. There's the famous story where Toledo was scheduled to play Chicago in an exhibition game, and Cap went to the manager of the Blue Sox and said, "We're not going to play this game." Blue Sox manager said, "Okay, well then you can give us all the gate receipts and you won't make any money. And oh, by the way, we'll also count this as a forfeit and a win. Otherwise, we're going to play Walker in right field in this game." where he's going to start in right field. And so Cap Anson acquiesced, right? They played the game. But Cap pretty much single-handedly made sure that no black players would ever play in the major leagues again. Now, one of the important things to remember is this was never written. There was never any point where any owner, manager, league authority said black guys can't play baseball. Just it didn't. It was an unwritten rule, and it was really one of the best kept. It was really one of the biggest open secrets in all of baseball. If you go back and you look at the black newspapers at the time, this is a common subject until the formation of the Negro National League in 1920. This is a common subject. Why can't we play in the major leagues? Why won't they take us? Our players are better than theirs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. Leading the charge of this was really the black newspapers and the black journalists, right? The black journalists started calling for, integration beginning in the 1930s. Famously, in the Ken Burns documentary, a telegram was quoted, and this is by a writer for the Pittsburgh Courier, which was one of the biggest black newspapers at that time. Certainly one of the biggest newspapers in Pittsburgh, black or white at all. And they had really a great bunch of journalists and media there. At one point, one of the journalists writes to the ownership of the Pittsburgh Pirates, the local team for them, sending a telegram. For those who are just listening to the podcast, the telegram looks like this. Know your club needs players. Stop. Have answer to your prayers right here in Pittsburgh. Stop. Josh Gibson, catcher. First base, Buck Leonard and Ray Brown. Pitcher of Homestead Grays and Satchel Paige, pitcher. Cool Papa Bell of the Pittsburgh Crawfords. All available at reasonable figures. Stop. Would make Pirates formidable pennant contenders. Stop. What is your attitude? Stop. Wire answer. Right? Some great 30s English there for you. What is your attitude? Fantastic.
What is your attitude?
Yeah, exactly. Nowadays we would just say, what do you think? All right. Okay. Now, wow. Josh Gibson, quite possibly the greatest catcher of all time. Right? Until recently, until Bonds was noted as the all-time leader in home runs. Okay, any Major League Baseball player. Buck Leonard in his time was compared to Lou Gehrig. Quite possibly could be the second or third greatest first baseman of all time. Satchel Paige speaks for itself. Debuted in the American League at age 53, maybe eventually when they integrated baseball. He didn't even know his age, to be fair. Probably the greatest pitcher of all time. Cool Papa Bell, again, one of the all-time greats. These are some stud players. But what was the owner's attitude? We don't know. No response. Okay. After this telegram, there really began this deluge, right? Where just weekly, the Pittsburgh newspapers, especially, but most of the black newspapers, discussed this almost every week, right? In that offseason, in the 1938 offseason, this journalist, Chester Washington is his name, actually confronted the Pittsburgh owner at a meeting. And you can check out this subtitle here. Pirates owner would favor sepia players. Okay? Right? Which is weird. You don't see that too often, even in the 30s. My theory is that they didn't want to use black because this was probably still associated with the Chicago Black Sox. of 20 years, 19, 20 years previous. That's my theory because you really don't see this too often. Sepia players. But yeah, basically he's talking about the Negro Leagues. The article is very good. The owner talks about how great Satchel Paige is, how great Josh Gibson is, da 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 da. Will I sign these players? We'll see. Now, in 1940, this gave, I should say, the black media, black baseball players were given optimism. The second ever Major League Baseball commissioner was named, a guy called Happy Chandler, a former senator from Kentucky. Okay, he follows Kennesaw Mountain Landis, whose only line on integration of baseball was, "We're not going to talk about that right now." Right. Basically. So Landis refused to address this issue directly. Chandler began talking about this right from the beginning. Now, we had World War II, so that really put a hold on things. However, World War II baseball really pointed out how badly Negro League players could be used in the major leagues. There's the famous story about Pete Gray. Have you ever heard of Pete Gray?
No.
Okay. Pete Gray played for the St. Louis Browns for one season. I think it was 1944. Pete Gray had one arm.
Oh.
Okay.
Wow.
So you mean to tell me that there weren't great black baseball players who were better than the one-armed guy? Come on now. Come on now. This guy had to take off his glove to throw the ball in from the outfield. Come on now. Josh Gibson isn't better than this guy? But it was the war, you couldn't do that kind of thing. So many of our great players are overseas, blah, 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 blah. Actually, I should point this out too, because back in those days, if you were named Happy, if this was your nickname, that was usually sarcastic. One of the Black Sox was a guy called Happy Felsch. And if you've seen that movie, 8 Men Out, he's the guy who's afraid to smile because his face might crack, right? So therefore, his nickname was Happy. But apparently, actually, Happy Chandler was a happy guy. He earned this nickname studying at Transylvania College, which you have to love. Actually, not in Romania. Yeah, actually not in Romania, actually in Kentucky. But but you got to love that. Hey, where'd you go to school? Transylvania. Hey. Now, this still exists. It exists as Transylvania University now. But it does still exist. It does still exist. So, Happy Chandler was really he was the guy who really started to get the ball rolling on this. And in fact, to this day, he's known as the guy who was commissioner of baseball when Jackie Robinson came into the league. Okay, still known for that. Unfortunately, he was also known as very sympathetic to the players, so he didn't last long as commissioner. Whenever you have a player sympathetic a commissioner sympathetic to the players, they don't last long. Okay. After the war, this really became a topic in sports news. Here is a piece from 1942. It's very typical of the time. Sports writer Jack Troy was a columnist for Associated Press, okay, which meant basically that his columns were printed all over the U.S., right? It's a syndicated column. Now, basically, this is pretty standard kind of viewpoint among the liberals in America. Here's the opening to his column. He says, practical-minded observers are injecting sense at long last into the old agitation to allow Negro ball players to play with white teams in organized baseball. Okay, right? Now, this is the liberal guy, right, saying this. Okay, now, let me ask you this. All right, he says that there's finally a rational argument about this. And in fact, it's an argument against black players joining the major league, put forth by black journalists and ball players. Why? Can you guess?
No
What
idea.
would be the argument against it? Okay. Well, here's the thing. And this became a real point in the 30s and 40s for the Negro ball players. Okay. So here is a columnist from a newspaper called the People's Voice. It's a black newspaper based in Harlem, New York. Unfortunately, I could not find an archive for the People's Voice unless you want to go to the New York City Public Library, which is a bit inaccessible for me right now. So we have to take the secondhand quote here as the word for it. But what Joe Bostic, the columnist, said was, quote, "Our approach to the question is strictly necessary. We're deadly practical about the entire situation. We're not convinced that baseball played in the organized leagues represents the best caliber of ball." So, in other words, many Negro League players and managers thought that their league was just as good, and why should we play their game? Right? There's also the economic argument, especially among the Southern teams, which did not have major league teams, that, this is vital for the community. This brings a lot of money to the black sections of the city. Da 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 da. So this was actually an argument made. Branch Rickey didn't see it that way. And in fact, at one point in the early 40s, he established his own league, his own Negro league called the U.S. Baseball League, just so he could pick players out later on, right? You may remember, you may know that Branch Rickey created basically the organized minor leagues, what we have today. There have always been minor leagues, but Branch Rickey was the first one to affiliate his team with minor league teams. In other words, he bought something like 200 minor league contracts of players and said, okay, if these guys are ever good enough, they're on my team, which at that point was the Cardinals. So he basically, that was Branch Rickey's business strategy. Is, okay, I'm just going to buy all the contracts, and then when I can get them, I will. Okay, so going back to Jackie, okay, I just want to pay a little heed here. Jackie had to be awesome to make the major leagues. Here are some of his incredible statistics for those watching. 6-time All-Star, once in the Negro Leagues as a rookie in 1945. 1949 to 1954, made the National League All-Star team all 6 years. He was the home run leader in the Negro American Leagues in 1945. Not really known for home runs, but could do it. Rookie of the Year in 47, the stolen base leader in the National League in 47 and 49, the MVP in 49, batting champion in 49, and of course, as far as Brooklyn is concerned, the World Series champion in 1955, his biggest achievement, beating the Yankees and giving the Brooklyn Dodgers their only title ever. And of course, he made the All-Century team in Major League Baseball. Okay, Jackie, great player. Now, let's talk about this. All right, the original question, of course, is why can't anybody hit 400? All right, let's talk about the asterisk. All right, and you'll see, those who can see from my graphic that I'm just using this as an excuse to get Phil Jackson in here. But nowadays, we like to use this asterisk as a derisive term. I believe that Phil Jackson popularized this when he described the Rockets winning 2 titles in the 90s as having an asterisk because Michael Jordan wasn't in the league those 2 years, right? And so ever since then, when we want to be sarcastic about achievements in sports, we say, yeah, but it's got an asterisk. Okay. So going back to the original question about why cats don't hit 400 in the major leagues anymore, I have a suggestion. Okay. Here it is. All right. Here's Wikipedia, not the greatest source, but I'm just going for statistics here. So these should be pretty good. Here's Wikipedia. What this is the page of demographics in the US. Okay. Racial demographics. Okay. Here's the chart from 1910 to 2020. We're only going to be concerned with 1920 to 1950 because these were the years of the organized Negro leagues. Right? But check it out. In these decades, between 9.7 and 10% of the population is black, which means they couldn't play. Right? And for me, that's it. That's it. The reason why nobody can hit 400 now is because the major leagues, up until the 70s, had access to 100% of ball players. After the 70s, this is when we began to have access to 100% of the baseball playing world. Right? I mean, just imagine today if we still had non-integration in baseball. The so-called major league teams would be getting killed by the Venezuelas of the world. The major leagues would be nothing right now if we didn't have integration. Instead, what we have is one of the most competitive sports leagues in the world. Thank God for integration. However, the question is this. Do all major league statistics before 1950 get an asterisk? Does Babe Ruth get an asterisk because he never had to face up against Satchel Paige? Do we? Look,
Wow.
we're giving Bonds and McGuire asterisks for taking steroids, right? Do we give major leaguers asterisks?
I mean,
because
there's got to be dynamics every season that
right.
that affects stats, right?
Right.
So
right.
every season would have an asterisk.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, I think that, there's an era there where the main drug being used in sports in baseball is amphetamine, and you have access to most players. So I don't know if every season deserves one, but on the other hand, if you take that mentality, then do we have to accept the steroid guys? Right? Is playing against guys on steroids the same as playing against 90% of the country? Right? So for me, the integration of baseball brings up these other questions as well. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of black sports writers today that think that all these players should have an asterisk. That's for sure. Now, in 2020, I believe, Major League Baseball actually officially released a notice that said, yes, now Negro League stats count in Major League stats. So there is that aspect of it. But again, you could say the same thing about Negro League teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, Satchel Paige won 300, 350 games, whatever it was. But he never faced Babe Ruth. He never faced Lou Gehrig and Ty Cobb and all those guys. So, is there an asterisk on these statistics? However, just one more time, we don't really need to start a fight. I love to start these fights, but I love to discuss debate. But let's just this week, let's remember Jackie Robinson, one of the greats. I fear that the legend is sort of fading away a little bit. As we take this stuff for granted nowadays. And in fact, there's actually fewer black baseball players than ever before, than full integration. So I feel like Jackie is kind of dropping out of the public consciousness a little bit as we care less about history and sports and more about today. So I hope that, especially in America, we can all appreciate Jackie and what he represents as a culture in America. This really represents a big step up for American culture. And really, some people believe that this is the beginning of the modern civil rights movement, with Jackie Robinson as a symbol. So there you go. That's your sports history 15 minutes. And like I say, let's all remember Jackie Robinson, one of the great American heroes.